Welcome to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbie DiMaggio. We are here today with Willem Eskes. Welcome, Willem. That's like
Thank you,
a
Dave.
tongue twister. Welcome, Willem. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. You and I met at a mindset on a mindset panel early this year, right?
That's
That
correct.
was,
Yes.
that was really, really quite enjoyable. So, and my book just came out, Mindset in Motion. If you go to mindsetinmotionbook.com, you can learn all about mindset and conquering your goals and activating. So, we are going to talk about Willem today and what he does. I was so fascinated when we met at the panel that I invited him to be a guest. So, Willem is the director of strategic partnerships and education for Cinergy Spaces. In short, we build high performance specialty spaces like custom home theaters, recording studios, media podcast rooms, golf and ski simulators, video gaming rooms, nurseries, and panic rooms. More importantly, we install acoustic architecture, primary bedrooms, gyms, rec rooms, kitchens, offices, etc., to create low RT60 acoustically comfortable spaces, an integral aspect of wellness. While the attached brochure gives some idea of who we are, it's the light of the acoustic architecture aspect. A well designed interior controls for acoustics in order to contribute to a welcoming environment. Neglecting it undermines otherwise strong design. Home is the deepest realization of comfort, connection, and inspiration. And a low RT60 value in a space in your home is one of the most overlooked aspects in creating warm, healthy, and inspiring spaces. Well, I love that. Wow. I didn't get to see all these amazing photographs. That is
Yeah.
really
Yeah, they were rolling. That was a handful for people to take in, I'm sure. And
well,
it
you're going to
included a lot of my
nice.
personal
Well,
photos of my family and my dog.
yeah, well, that's good because you're a human being next to what you do. So we love that too. So before we dive deep, and one of the words that caught me was wellness. I am super right now into biohacking and wellness, and I've just had my DNA done. So they check my DNA. I threw a swab, and now I'm doing a whole vitamin supplement panel, and I have my appointment later today to see what my DNA represents and what vitamins I'll be taking. So I'm very excited about wellness and talking about that in the home. But before we go there, what first drew you into designing high performance specialty spaces? And maybe just give us a brief background of how you got to where you are today. Doesn't have to be brief. We have 50 minutes, but tell us how you got to where you are today.
Sure, sure. So basically, I've always been I've always had a relationship with sound that's been a little deeper than the average person. So it affects me in certain ways. Early on, I was playing in bands and things like that. Um, and all that to say, I got eventually into energy efficiency. And then about 6 years ago, I was recruited to Synergy, and it was really intriguing everything that was going on there. So it was, I mean, first of all, it's wonderful to be recruited. It's nice to be wanted. But
Absolutely.
I was really inspired by the work that was going on there. And really, I know, like I said, that was a handful, that introduction for people to grasp. But on the one side, basically, there's recording studios and custom theaters that are being built around the country. And that's the easy one to grasp. And then on the other side are those architectural acoustics and really that wellness factor that we can get into.
Absolutely. So first, RT, was it RT60? Is that the,
Correct.
yeah, RT, tell us a little, what is RT60?
Absolutely. And really what that is that's the scientific way to measure a room or a space, to know how it integrates with the human body. And there's different reasons for having that measurement. I'm going to go ahead and start. I usually finish when I'm speaking about acoustics with this quote, but I'm going to go ahead and
Okay.
start this time to mix things up. But we actually had built a custom theater for a client up in Malibu. and she hand wrote me a note. And I opened it up, and it basically said, "Thank you for building my favorite room in our house. I not only go in there to watch movies, but I go in there to relax, to read, to do my yoga, to re-energize."
Wow.
And what she basically was saying, the subtext of that is, thank you for making this room a mid RT60 value. Because I'm just gonna roll with this. What goes on in most spaces is it's hard surfaces that we're involved in. So there's glass, there's wood, there's stone, and all those type of surfaces reflect sound. They reflect it, they actually duplicate and amplify it. So we've all been in that restaurant where we're trying to speak with each other, and we've got
Yep.
all the other conversations going on. We've got the music playing, the plates are clanging, silverware. And when it comes down to it, your brain is actually processing all those different sounds going on and trying to get the one that matters. And that's why in those situations, we leave that restaurant saying, oh, well, the food was good, but the environment was cold or uninviting, or we actually have something called listener fatigue, and or our
Mm.
voice is gravelly. And long story short, it doesn't have to be that way. And you can address that with versions of acoustic treatments. And those treatments are what absorb those room reverberations or reflections. So cutting back to that note I received from the client, that was a really well treated screening room, movie theater in her home. And so it did in that room what could be done really in any space, and reduced those room reflections. And so cutting back
Mm.
to the RT60 value, it's really a measurement of how long it takes for 60 decibels to decrease in a space. So like if I clap, the 60 decibel reduction is timed. And so things like churches have a very large, and large being like 1.5 or 2.0 RT60 value. And that's good because you want the choir to sound nice. Churches are
Okay.
actually a really a bit of a difficult subject because you also have sermons and things like that where you want speech intelligibility. So you have to find that perfect medium, which is custom space by space. But I digress.
That's
Back to the
okay.
RT60 value of a space. For conversation, we really want it around zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6. And that is absolutely achievable in any space, not just a recording studio or a, you know, custom home theater.
And does it, so I'm picturing, I'm visual, so I'm picturing this big room that's a media room, her room. And then I'm assuming, and does it have to? I assume that has a door on it, so it encloses. Does this room
Yeah,
that you designed to have a door so it's boxed in?
absolutely. Well, it doesn't have to be. If it's a, say, a dedicated theater or recording studio, then the answer is absolutely yes. But
Right.
there's also a lot of folks out in the country that are basically creating what we call media rooms. And that's a little bit more multi-purpose. In Los Angeles, and then even up in like Northern California, there's a lot of folks looking for dedicated theaters. But that gets smaller as you get around to the rest of the country. And so media rooms offer you a lot more flexibility. And sometimes those have open hallways and things like that.
Yeah,
So
that's where I
I
was
think,
going. We have a loft area, it doesn't have a door because it's on our third floor and it's open, and I love that room. And but I was wondering if that's something that could be done because it doesn't have a door.
right. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more for you and the listeners. And
Sure.
so if we are working on a level 3 recording studio, um, essentially there's 4 sections to work through. And the first one is design. And that's to get everybody on the same page, literally, figuratively, so we all know what the plan is. And then once it's actually being constructed, step 2 is the isolation stage. And so that's on these high-end theaters. So this doesn't exist in your loft, but so people understand, what we do in those high-end situations is construct a room inside the other room. And what you're doing is decoupling that inside room, because sound travels basically three ways. It travels airborne, like we're hearing it now. It travels impact, like you hear the footsteps above you. But the toughest one is it travels vibrationally, and a lot of times will excite building structure. So what
Mm.
that's doing is decreasing that to a minimum, so you're not hearing the fire engine driving by outside. But similarly, if little Johnny is gaming in that room and the explosions are going off, you don't want grandma's bed shaking around on the second floor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that is keeping the outside world out, keeping the inside world in. And that takes us to step three, because you still have what I call a reverberative box. Again, drywall, concrete, any of those are hard surfaces, and you can have the greatest speakers in the world, and they won't sound good in that space because of all those reflections. So
Right.
step three is really the critical one to me, and this is what would help your loft, is acoustic treatments, or treating the room. And that, cutting to the chase, is it all comes down to reducing those reflections or room reverberations. And so that can be done very different ways, different degrees. On the very high end, there's absorption and diffusion, and things are planned out specifically where reflection points are being hit. In a minimum case, you could do like a 50% or 70% coverage with just 1 inch treatments, 2 inch treatments. And then you can even use, like, artwork that hangs on your wall could double as acoustic treatments. There's all sorts of ways to lower the RT60 value of a space. So so that is really important, and that's the one we'll probably hone in on as we speak further. And then, just to for completeness sake, the fourth step is the finishes in those spaces. So that's the things that you see, the drapes, the carpeting, the sconces, the seating, things along those lines, the upholstered fabric on the walls, etc.
So you work with, you work with a designer, or to, I mean, you do everything. It looks like it's not just the walls, it's carpeting, drapes, it's all of that.
So typically, the we're working with the, well, every case is different, but in many cases there's a home being constructed from the ground up or being remodeled. And in
Okay.
those cases, there's a lot more work going on. And so we're typically given the concrete box or the drywall box by the GC.
Okay.
And because really these rooms, when you think it all the way through, are like a little house in one small space. There's so much
Right.
to think of, and even the air conditioning, and you don't want to hear that whistling. So the ducts have to be larger, and there shouldn't be sharp turns, and so you need to fit that all into this one space. And so there's we work with there are folks that design the super high end ones, and that's all they do. So we have several partners that are strictly designers of those high level, you know half million, $1 million plus recording studios, theaters, things like that. And then when you come down to a smaller situation, if somebody wants to put a podcast room in their home or a video gaming room, um, really there, it's more about just warming up the space. And again, warming up is the equivalent of getting that RT60 value in the correct spot. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it does. I'm just, as I'm thinking about what I like, oh, maybe I should have a podcast room. Maybe I'll turn the gym, maybe we'll turn the gym into a podcast room, forget, and I'll put the exercise equipment elsewhere. I'm like, this would be a nice room to do that.
And
Um,
to your
yeah,
point, I'm going to jump in, because to your point,
yeah.
what I'm speaking about doesn't have to happen just in a podcast room or a studio, because we do actually do entire homes where we're warming
Okay.
up the gym, we're warming up the kitchen, the master bedroom. It really, you can warm up entire homes. So it's just really interesting, once, to your point, once you start thinking it through, all the different things that can be done.
And so do you, and I'm sure bedrooms as well, I would assume it would be the perfect place to be calm and, to get good rest. Do you do what is the, other than, let's say, I'm sure you do a lot of studios, for singers and stuff, but and recorders, but recording people, producers. But what is for the average person, family, what sort of rooms are popular?
Right. So typically, back to that media room idea, that's where most people are thinking about it. They're giving it some thought.
Right.
So it typically starts there.
Yeah.
And when I'm speaking with clients, I find it really interesting because if we go back to that crowded restaurant, you
Yes.
or I or somebody else could look at the menu and say, oh, well, this looks good, that doesn't really look so good, because our palates are trained since we're little kids on what we like and what we don't like. But as lay people going about our world, no one ever trained us in acoustics and sound and what to expect, and more importantly, what's possible. So I find it really interesting because most people don't realize what you can achieve as
Right.
far as creating a warm space. And a lot of people, you said you speak earlier that you speak visually, you think visually. My wife does
Yes.
as well. And really, when I speak to most architects and designers, most of them are really concentrating on the visuals, what it will
Yeah.
look like, what it'll look like in a magazine, and they're working on the plans and the renderings. Well, with all those things, you can't hear what it's going to sound like,
Right. Exactly.
right? So, we had a family up in Bel Air that spent 5+ years building this fantastic home. And then everybody was gone, the designer, the architect, the GC, and they finally excitedly held their first dinner party. And it was a mess because the speech intelligibility was ridiculously low, and they were having trouble hearing each other. And that was just with 16 people in one room.
Wow.
So, yeah, so you can imagine if you take that same effect, well, you can imagine to a large restaurant where there's 30, 40, 50 people, and throw in the staff and the music like we said earlier. So in that case, they actually called us, and it's a little sad that it's the afterthought instead of the
Right.
before thought. But again, this is part of the education, which hopefully your
Right.
listeners can join in
Question.
on.
So when you and I spoke, I said, because I didn't know what you did, and we talked a little bit. And then I said, "Oh, I've been to a restaurant. It's Oliveto Restaurant down in Oakland on College Avenue, which is a different restaurant now. But I was in one of those restaurants where they dropped these little things down. I don't know what it was, but in being in that big restaurant, it was like we were just so close to each other, huge restaurant, yet we were having an intimate conversation. People couldn't overhear, but we could hear across. It was the weirdest thing. So I completely get it. But going to the people in Bel Air, so how did they obviously realized it was a mess, but how did they know to contact you, or who did they, if they didn't know about you, how did they figure it out to, like, that is a thing? Like, I didn't know it was a thing.
Exactly. And right there is my point, is most people don't know. So we just live in these
Yeah.
situations without knowing that they could be corrected or made so much better.
Right.
So luckily in that case, we had actually built their custom theater in the house.
Oh,
So I had spoken with the owners previously, and they had become aware of what else we do, because I'll say it is difficult to get across to people in 30 seconds that whole concept.
right.
And you can get across, yes, we build recording studios and custom theaters and video gaming rooms. But I mean, I love the architectural acoustics, because what's better than warming up a space where you can have that experience that you just had or had previously in that restaurant, where you have an intimate conversation with your friend. And so they knew about us, and so they called me to ask, can something be done here?
Wow.
And so again, I went up there, and it was gorgeous to look at, just like on the rendering. But it was stone floors and glass windows and hardwood ceiling and all hard reflective surfaces. So we ended up retrofitting in an acoustic plaster cloud over the dining room table. And there's all different types of solutions to achieve the same goal of lowering those room reverberations. So acoustic plaster is one of them. We just did that same idea in a church sanctuary ceiling, which was
Okay.
huge. Um, but you can use perforated woods. So it's wood that has basically little holes that allows the sound to get up into the treatments, which are buried behind the wood. And you can use, again, the classic fabric and treatments.
Mm.
And so fabrics can really run the gamut, and there are wide span ones, and you can print on them. So you can really achieve a lot of different goals with fabrics. And so, like, again, in that case, we used acoustic plaster. And the unfortunate piece is just that they probably spent 3 times the amount of money
Right,
retrofitting that in than had
right.
it been in the original plan.
And then what do you do? I can imagine because a lot of houses in LA have, big dramatic windows and sliding doors. So what did you do, if anything, to the all those windows? They don't want to cover it with a drape while you're having dinner.
You're absolutely right. So there's only so much you can do once it's built.
Right. And what
And
would you previously, if you had it from, that dining room ahead of time, what would you have done?
well, we ended up doing a cloud, which was a portion of the ceiling. But in reality, that entire ceiling could have been acoustic plaster or even a wide span fabric that, like
Oh,
both of those, I refer to as drywall alternatives
and this is
because,
in the ceiling.
yeah, ceiling is the easiest place to treat because it's just there and no one's going to be touching it or knocking it, bumping into it, or anything along those lines.
Right.
So, so yeah, so, and then it depends again how far you want to take it. Um, so in that case, I mean, the windows are the windows. I mean, there obviously is a compromise to get to the end goal. Now, in the case of we had built a recording studio that the owner wanted a sliding glass door to look out over the Japanese garden, and I loved it because the top piece of the puzzle is inspiration
Right.
above having a perfect studio. So so basically there it is. We actually had to angle it so the reflections didn't get you right at the mixing console, but that's incorporated into that space. And then if and when needed, we do actually have a drape that can be pulled across it. So if you do need to get to like almost a perfect recording studio situation, then you can pull the drapes actually on both sides because we actually use some stone for aesthetics on the other side of that studio.
Wow. So what does it cost? Give us a low end and give us a high end. Obviously LA has so much luxury and there's obviously places elsewhere, but what if someone wanted to, on a regular house or a smaller house or it's not a
Sure.
huge unlimited budget? What if someone, every day wanted to do one, to have one in their home?
Right. So I mean, my very first idea is to do the ceilings of your space. Again, just because we talked about they're so easy.
Right.
And so there, I would say you would think maybe about double the cost of drywall to do it properly.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of an investment above and beyond drywall, but back to the wellness issue or the
Yeah.
wellness thought. Again, just to the and to that note that the woman in Malibu wrote me, if
Yeah.
you warm up your spaces, they're they're inviting. I mean, even the Walt Disney Concert Hall downtown that has all acoustic plaster, and if you
Right.
for anyone who's been in there, there's not a bad seat in that auditorium, and
Right.
they really went to town on the acoustics of that space, and you can be in the back right corner and you hear so well.
Wow.
And I was speaking to somebody and that came up, but before we were talking about the acoustics, she said, I can't wait to go back there. And and even that surmises those situations because when you warm a space up acoustically, it's engaging and you actually want to spend time in those spaces. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I just picture her sleeping in there too. I
Right.
picture her doing yoga in the front seat, the front row, right in front of the on stage. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Willem. Thank you.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Welcome back to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbie DiMaggio. We are here today with Willem Eskes, and we are talking about sound. And so we are going to bring up some of those wonderful images that we were scrolling through so you can walk us through, because I'm visual and I'm sure the audience would love to see how this is done. So let's tell us is this okay to start on this one?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So what you're looking at here is actually just a small voice. Actually, we
Oh,
just switched.
oh yeah. Zach, can we go to the first,
We can start here. This is fine. Um,
okay, just
so
there.
so this is actually a custom theater in a home down near La Jolla, and it's fully isolated, which the interesting thing about isolation, and that was that step 2 we spoke about earlier in the program, is you don't see isolation. You simply feel and experience it. And it's a wonderful thing. That's probably one of the tougher pieces of the puzzle to educate clients on of the bang for the buck you get from that. All that to
I
say, this,
ceiling
go
looks
ahead.
beautiful. The ceiling looks beautiful.
Exactly. And we have our own custom millwork shop, and that's a barreled ceiling. That's all custom millwork that you see. And in those coffers is actually acoustically transparent fabric. And so that houses different lights and speakers, and then even fire sprinklers and things along those lines.
So are you working in tandem with the, what is it, our AVR, the audio
Yeah,
video
yeah,
people? Okay.
right. So around the country, and especially in Los Angeles, there's many what we call audio video integrators, and they're the folks that are basically keeping track of the speakers and the wiring and the screens and all those things. And typically they're involved in the entire house if it's an entire house being built or remodeled. But yeah, we absolutely work hand in hand with all the different AV integrators on these projects.
And then on the side there it looked like some wood with some lights. Is that what you did too? Does that have to do with the acoustics?
So I wouldn't say that has to do particularly with the acoustics. What we did build those millwork columns and that baseboard that you see.
right?
And then those are particular sconces that you see. There's 4 of them in this view. And so those sconces were attached to those millwork columns. What's going on is the fabric, the upholstered fabric between the millwork columns and on the bottom of the screen, and then again in the coffers of the ceiling, that's all acoustically transparent fabric. So behind that fabric, particularly on the walls, is where you have those acoustic treatments that soak up those room reverberations.
Okay. And then, oh, and then the flooring. I believe it's carpet. Did you have anything to do with the flooring?
So the answer is yes. I mean, the carpet, there's on the smaller scale, things like carpet and sofas do soak up some reverberations. They're always good, and but I wouldn't say they're at the professional level, if that makes sense.
Right.
To that point, when we were talking about that isolation shell, a lot of times, particularly in a recording studio, you have what's called a floating floor. And so the floor is actually built on what we call isolators. And that again is to limit the vibrational transmissions that are happening. And those don't only just have to happen in a theater or recording studio, but you can use those under things like pool equipment or really anything, even a blender. Like if you look at a blender or a high-end blender, I guess, in a store, you'll actually see it looks like huge rubber padding on the base of the blender. And what that is really a version of an isolator.
Oh, okay. This
Does
is a
it,
beautiful one. It does. It totally makes sense. So I want to go to well, tell us about this photo. Then I saw that really cool photo with the wood on the walls that looked like a wave. But let's go here. Is this a restaurant or a home?
So this actually is the small recording studio I was referring to earlier that has the glass sliding window on the right-hand side.
Okay.
So, so this is actually in 600 square feet, on a under a house, but on the first level. And so it's you can actually see on the left-hand side, that's actually a pumice stone that's on the wall, which has some absorptive qualities. But again, what I was talking about earlier is you can see the drapery on the left-hand side. It's fairly well lit. And then there's
Yep.
also some on the right. So if you ever wanted to pull those closed, that's an option.
I love it. That's great. And this is a recording
Yeah,
studio.
this is another recording studio. This one's in New Jersey, and this was actually originally built in the 1980s for the woman living there. And the owner, she unfortunately had passed away, and there was someone who owned this property for about 25 years. And then a new owner purchased it about 2 years ago. But the intermediate owner destroyed this room, and it was used for storage and torn apart and moldy, and it was nothing like this picture you're looking at.
Oh my
So the
God.
new owner, yeah, it was really sad. And the new owner basically wanted to restore it to its 1980s design glory. And then also, he wanted to bring into it a newer technology called Atmos, which is like a version of surround sound that didn't exist back then. So this was actually a marriage of new technology and old design, and you're looking at the result there. It really worked out really nicely.
So I know you can't say who lives there now, but can you tell us who was who owned it previous in the
It,
80s?
it- yeah, it was actually Whitney Houston's home recording studio.
I That is exactly who came to mind. That all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm going to ask. That's very that's I don't know, that just came to mind. Oh wow, this is cool.
Yeah, so this is actually a combination golf simulator custom theater. And so what you're looking at right now, it's in golf simulator mode, and that large screen at the front comes down out of the ceiling. And then there's specific lighting in the ceiling that's over the tee box, and between the two couches is a little, almost like a little coffee table that we custom built to cover the golf simulator machine. And I'm not sure if I have the other photo where it goes into theater mode, but
Wow.
essentially the couch that's up against the left wall swings over that tee box, and then the screen retracts into the ceiling to reveal the movie theater screen. And then again, this room is actually fully isolated as well. So you know, you can play music or scream, and you're not going to affect the rest of the house.
That's incredible. Wow. That's fun. Where is this located?
So this one is actually up in Chatsworth, California, and
Okay.
this is a dedicated video gaming space.
Oh my gosh. Is this for adult or child?
It's for an adult. Yeah. Um, so yeah, it was really, I mean, again, fun. In front of those monitors and everything, there's actually it's a sunken, and there's a large couch there with a table. So basically, the people who are not gaming can be sitting on the couch, and then that screen, which you see a portion of,
Yeah.
uh, actually has a live feed of what's going on all three computer screens, so that you can follow along with this gaming experience.
And those are chairs. I believe those are chairs, those white things.
Yeah, you're looking at the back of those chairs,
Okay.
correct?
Those are cool. Oh my God, this is very, very far out. And what is this?
So this is a voice recording studio.
Oh,
So it's relatively simple, relatively small space, and but it's entirely treated, including the ceiling, and that's where the um, the folks from South Park go in to record their voices.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So what I really like about this, just the fun, like I always say, inspiration is above perfect in my book. And while the room and the walls are actually treated, those specific acoustic treatments you're looking at on the right hand wall are mimicking the mountains of Colorado. So you see the little white snow caps and then the green
Oh,
mountains.
oh, that's very cool. My kids went to Boulder, so I know Colorado very well. Oh,
There
that's
you go.
beautiful. That is very cool. So I want to see, yeah, what is this? Another studio, media room. Big.
Yeah. So this one was interesting because those geometric shapes you're looking at are actually proud of each other, and so it went to another level as far as putting this together to pull it off. And then there's also a light setting where you can see behind all these walls, where you actually see all the treatments and the speakers and everything, which is what the owner wanted in this case.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I want to, there, this is the one I wanted to understand. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, so this, again, I love the architectural acoustics. What's going on here, this is actually in a conference room. And again, this conference room was all drywall and glass. And so the wood you're seeing there is strictly, I call it a wave wall, but we
Yeah.
built that strictly for the architectural element. And behind it is black fabric, and behind that black fabric, which obviously it's acoustically transparent fabric, and then you've got your treatments behind the black fabric.
And
So you've effectively,
against a
go
wall,
ahead,
this is
Debbie.
against a big wall. When you say the treatments, is that the curtains when you say treatments?
No, the acoustic treatments are actually what's soaking up those
Oh,
room reverberations. And that, again, just to clarify, is that's that secret sauce that makes our spaces comfortable.
okay.
So they're usually hidden in these kind of situations. And so they're obviously not behind the TV, but everywhere around the TV where the black fabric is, and that's what's between those millwork columns, if you or
Right. The
yeah,
way,
yeah,
the way. It's
the
very
wave.
cool.
Exactly.
So when we spoke, when we met at the panel, the mindset panel, we were speaking of, I said, well, what sort of rooms do you do? Yes, recording studios, that's always the given. But you spoke about doing we can put the slides down now. Thanks, Zach. You were talking about, well, you're like, some people like to do nurseries, but tell us about the nursery and the reasons maybe we shouldn't do a nursery.
Valid point. And that's what we did get into because I have my personal take on it. And essentially, the whole idea was in our culture we have the classic shh, the baby's sleeping. And I had a conversation when I was younger with a woman who said that's completely wrong. We should be loud when babies are sleeping because that way they grow up with this high tolerance. And so she told me how she would vacuum while the kids were taking their naps and everything. So I registered that for me personally. Um, so in my world, we give the clients what they want. And so this client basically wanted to have a nursery that was, first of all, isolated and treated, which is my world, but they also wanted it to, for lack of better words, look fantastic. And like you saw in some of those images, again, our millwork shop, we fabricate so many different things, things worthy of being in a museum. And so they wanted us to basically construct all I could say is like a world-class nursery. But
World class nursery.
so so it was isolated and treated. So again, it's an engaging space to be in and a peaceful space. And so yeah, I'll go where the client wants to go with them.
Right. Okay, so let's ask some questions. I just kept flying out. How does acoustic design contribute to overall wellness and mental clarity?
Tremendously. And so I wouldn't consider myself the complete authority. I did attend a wellness clinic a couple of months ago, and I ended up having the privilege of sitting unknowingly next to a professor at Stanford who was attending. And so I would defer to her as far as all the scientific studies, but they're all out there. I mean, one can Google or ChatGPT how sound affects you. And I mean, it really goes very deep, even down to like in that restaurant. What's really happening is cortisol is flowing in our body, unbeknownst to us, and
Mhm.
that's part of what contributes to that listener fatigue that goes on. And but that's one that we can all grasp because we've all been there. But
Absolutely.
there are so many opportunities where we're being affected and we don't even realize it. And so really that's where I think I'd like to think part of this wellness wave that's going on, because right now there is this wave, but at the forefront people speak about light, water, and air, and
Right.
rightly so. But acoustics, I want to see them working their way into the equation because I mean you can tie blood pressure
Right.
to how you're affected by sound in an environment.
Right.
Even they've done studies of people that live around airports and things like that, and even accounting for air pollution and taking those out of the equation, they can still see how that type living in that type of environment affects you. And so you can see that on the large scale in that situation, but it really exists on the small scale in our homes as well.
That's so true. Because I could just, and I would, so the question is, how does the sound of a space influence how we connect with the people inside it? When I read that question that I wrote, what I'm thinking is, and I'll let you answer it too, but first I want to say how I know how, as we're having this conversation, you could get irritated because of the sound, or you can't hear someone, or you just maybe seem rude because you just shut down because you can't hear what they're saying. So now you answer the question, how does the sound of space influence how we connect with people inside it?
Absolutely. And an interesting fact I read probably half a year ago was that in our elementary school classrooms across the country, we have 75% speech intelligibility. And what that translates into is that the kids only hear 3 out of every 4 words that the teacher says. Now, can you imagine if we were having this conversation and you only were hearing 3 of the 4 words that I would say?
So frustrating. And
Right. So to your point, I mean, it can affect you in so many ways, but just as far as concentration, if you aren't getting all the information, that's going to affect you in one way. And and then the frustration, like you said, is going to affect you in another. And just the fact of not getting all the right information is going to intellectually affect you.
right,
So
exactly.
there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that all come down to having a well thought out acoustic environment.
So, yeah, it's really incredible. So, what are the most popular rooms that you're doing right now?
Sure, sure. So when it comes down to it, the Cinergy Spaces started building the level 3 custom theaters dedicated, and that's really what we're still known for to a degree. That was the very beginning, and that quickly morphed into the recording studios as well because they're so relative to each other. And then that quickly encapsulated the acoustic architecture because we were already treating these spaces in those theaters and media rooms and things like that. So that led us into that world of architectural acoustics. And my favorite clients are the ones that have already tried to do something and like either tried to do a theater on their own and blew it or did incorporate architectural acoustics in part of the room and or part of the house and understood how beneficial it was. So then the next go round they wanted to do the entire house. So that education, like the
Mhm.
people that have understand are my favorite clients because I don't need to educate as
Right.
strongly. With that said, I am on a mission, and thank you for having me on the show to
You're
educate
welcome.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we really can make it a much healthier place, just even in our homes.
Are there a lot of contractors and architects who are not aware of what people like you do? And do they
Yes.
try to do it themselves as well? Like,
Say that again.
are they trying to do it themselves? And do they actually even know that you exist and that you could really make this new home they're building even better?
So that is part of my mission. I've been speaking, doing lunch and learns and things like that at various architecture offices and GC offices and things like that.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, most people are aware, like someone that went to architecture school, they're going to do a chapter on acoustics, but it really, for most cases, I mean, I'm not going to say everybody, but for most cases, like I said, they're thinking about what it's going to look like and what
Right.
that rendering looks like and not really paying attention. I mean, some people, they're just not really paying attention to when this is all constructed, what's it going to sound like? And so um, there are acousticians, and that's fantastic. And a lot of times they'll be consulted, and I love that. With that said, sometimes we've seen uh, things recommended that were not constructible, or if they
Mm.
were, it was very, very expensive, and there might be an alternative solution to getting that to that same result. And really, that's the advantage of us building these things every day is we can figure out the really the most economical way to do it.
Mhm.
And the cherry I'll put on that conversation is sometimes acoustics is addressed in an original plan, but it seems to be one of the very first things that get value engineered out of the plan
Right.
because again people aren't trained on these things and they don't realize how much that's going to bring to the table. So oh well, we'll cut some costs here and take this out,
Right.
and then you get 5 years later the people move in and now it's the first thing that's complained about.
Right. Wow. This was so interesting. So, how do people get a hold of you and where could we follow you and learn more?
Absolutely. So the company is Cinergy Spaces, and Synergy is spelled like cinema. So it's Cinergy. And so a quick Google of Synergy Spaces should take you to our website. And I'm on there, and people can get a hold of me through the website. And yeah, there's so much that can be done out there. So I welcome any questions.
If you could change one thing about how homes are designed today, what would it be?
To have a complete acoustical stage before it's, I mean, even at the schematic stage, architectural schematic stage, even at that level, having that conversation
Mm,
with the clients, and 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 really just getting that education in there on what's possible and what it'll bring to the table for them.
right. I think it really, just having that experience in the restaurant, I think it brings such calmness and wellness. So I will be posting on my Instagram Beauty at Any Age blog about, I will be incorporating in my wellness blog about sound now. I did not think about that. So I will be going deep and tagging you on that. So thank you so much, Willem, for being here today. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Debbie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Tune in each week for another episode of Mastering the Art of Success with host Debbie DiMaggio. Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. Real stories, real strategies, real success.